She never imagined her journey west would end in a marriage of survival, and a bond that would change everything she thought she knew. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. Montana Territory, 1876. The sky stretched endlessly over the rolling prairie as Sarah Calloway stood at the edge of Fort Benton, her heart hammering against her ribs. At 22, with auburn hair that caught fire in the sunset and eyes the color of storm clouds, she had traveled west from Boston after her father's death, seeking a new beginning with her uncle, a frontier doctor. "Miss Calloway, I must advise against wandering this far from the fort," Lieutenant Davis warned, approaching on horseback. "Blackfeet scouts have been spotted nearby." Sarah shielded her eyes from the setting sun. "I merely needed air, Lieutenant. The journey has been suffocating." "These aren't Boston streets, ma'am. The territories are unforgiving." As they turned back toward the fort, 3 riders appeared on the horizon. Sarah recognized her uncle's weathered face among them. "Uncle Edward," she called out. Dr. Edward Palmer dismounted, embracing his niece. "Sarah, you've grown so. Your mother would be proud." That evening, as they dined in his modest home adjacent to the fort, her uncle explained his predicament. "The Blackfeet have suffered greatly this winter. Smallpox has returned and they're suspicious of white medicine." He paused, setting down his fork. "Their chief, Gray Wolf, has reluctantly agreed to let me treat his people, but only under certain conditions." Sarah noticed the tension in his voice. "What conditions, Uncle?" "The Blackfeet have a custom of cementing alliances through marriage." His eyes couldn't meet hers. "Gray Wolf has a son, Black Thunder, their fiercest warrior. He's lost 2 wives to disease." The implication hung heavy in the air. "You cannot mean—" Sarah's voice faltered. "I've negotiated for weeks. They'll only accept my medicine if there's a bond of family." Edward reached for her hand. "I know it's unthinkable, but dozens of children will die otherwise." Sarah pulled away, standing abruptly. "You'd sacrifice me to savages?" "They're people, Sarah. Desperate people watching their children die." His voice softened. "Black Thunder is feared by his enemies but respected by all. He speaks English from the mission school. You expect me to become the wife of a man who's probably scalped settlers?" Her voice trembled with indignation. "3 days," Edward said firmly. "Give me 3 days to show you the suffering before you decide. The children's lives are in our hands." Later that night, staring at the ceiling of her small room, Sarah contemplated escape. But where would she go? Back east across dangerous territory with winter approaching? Her funds were depleted by the journey west. The next morning, Edward took her to a small Blackfeet encampment on the outskirts of the fort, where he'd been permitted to treat those too ill to remain with the main tribe. The sight of feverish children, their bodies covered in pustules, their mother's eyes hollow with grief, shook Sarah to her core. Her uncle moved among them with gentle efficiency, teaching her to help apply compresses and administer medicine. "There are hundreds more like them," Edward whispered, as they treated a trembling 5-year-old girl. Without proper treatment, half the tribe could perish by spring. On the 3rd day, as Sarah was changing a bandage on a young boy's arm, a shadow fell across the entrance of the lodge. The women inside grew suddenly still, their eyes downcast. Sarah looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the light. When he stepped inside, she found herself facing the most imposing man she'd ever seen. Black Thunder stood well over 6 feet, his broad shoulders draped in a buffalo robe, his long black hair adorned with a single eagle feather. His face was strong-featured and stern, with high cheekbones and piercing dark eyes that assessed her coldly. What struck her most was not his formidable presence but the gentleness with which he knelt beside the sick child, speaking soft words in his native tongue. The boy's face brightened momentarily. Black Thunder rose, addressing her directly in perfect, if formal, English. "You are the healer's daughter?" "His niece," Sarah corrected, finding her voice. "You have gentle hands," he observed, then turned to leave. At the entrance, he paused without looking back. "Your uncle says you will decide today. Know this, I do not seek a wife, but my people need medicine. If you refuse, I will understand." With those words, he was gone, leaving Sarah more confused than ever. That evening, under the weight of countless suffering eyes, Sarah made her decision. "I'll do it," she told Edward, "but I have conditions of my own." The wedding ceremony took place at dawn 3 days later. Sarah stood trembling in a deerskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork, a gift from the women of the tribe. Her hair had been braided with small shells and feathers, and her face painted with ochre symbols she didn't understand. Gray Wolf, his weathered face solemn beneath his headdress, presided over the ceremony. Black Thunder stood opposite her, dressed in full ceremonial attire, his expression unreadable as they exchanged tokens. Sarah offering a silver locket containing her mother's portrait, Black Thunder presenting her with an intricately carved bone pendant. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said quietly, his only words during the entire ceremony. As they completed the rituals binding them together, Sarah realized she was now caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. The Blackfeet camp sprawled across a sheltered valley, dozens of teepees arranged in a crescent, following their traditional pattern. Upon their arrival, curious eyes followed Sarah everywhere. Children darted forward to touch her hair before being scolded by their mothers. The women, initially reserved, approached with cautious offerings of food and small gifts. Black Thunder led her to a large teepee at the camp's center. "This is your home now," he said, holding the entrance flap open. Inside, the dwelling was surprisingly spacious and orderly. Buffalo robes covered the ground, and painted designs adorned the inner lining of the teepee. A small fire pit occupied the center, with smoke rising through the opening at the top. "Your things are there." He indicated a space where her trunks had been placed. "I have hunting to do. My sister Morning Star will help you." Before Sarah could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone in the strange dwelling. She sank down onto a fur, the reality of her situation crashing over her. A young woman entered shortly after, introducing herself as Morning Star. Unlike her brother's stern demeanor, her eyes held warmth and curiosity. "You are brave to come here," she said in careful English. "Many women talk of you." "What do they say?" Sarah asked hesitantly. Morning Star smiled. "Some say you are a spirit woman with healing powers. Others say my brother took you by force." She sat cross-legged opposite Sarah. "I want to know the truth." Over the next hours, as Morning Star helped her arrange her belongings, Sarah found herself drawn to the young woman's forthright nature. She explained about her uncle's work and her decision to marry Black Thunder. "My brother is good man," Morning Star said, "but war and sickness have made him," she searched for the word, "hard, like stone on outside." That evening, when Black Thunder returned with 2 deer slung over his horse, Sarah was sitting outside the teepee, writing in her journal. He acknowledged her with a nod before taking the game to the women who prepared the meat. When he returned, he sat across the fire from her, cleaning his hunting knife methodically. "Your people have many questions about me," Sarah ventured. "They are curious," he replied without looking up. "Few have seen white women who were not captives or missionaries." "And what am I?" she asked boldly. His eyes met hers. "You are Black Thunder's wife, that is all they need to know." "And what does that mean here? What am I expected to do?" He considered her question. "Women prepare food, make clothing, gather wood. But you are here to help with medicine. That will be your work." "And us?" she asked, the question she'd been dreading. "What of husband and wife?" Black Thunder's expression didn't change. "I promised your uncle I would respect your ways. You will have your own sleeping place." He gestured to a sectioned-off area of the teepee. "No man will harm you while you are under my protection." Relief flooded through her, followed by confusion at her own reaction. Was she disappointed? In the days that followed, Sarah established a routine. Mornings were spent with her uncle, learning about the medicinal plants the Blackfeet used, and teaching him what she knew from her father's medical books. Afternoons were dedicated to treating the sick, while evenings were spent in the company of Morning Star, who patiently taught her the basics of the Blackfeet language and customs. Black Thunder remained distant, often leaving before dawn and returning after sunset. When present, he watched Sarah with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, yet he never approached her sleeping area. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day treating 3 severely ill children, Sarah returned to find the teepee empty. Relieved to have a moment alone, she removed her outer garments and washed with water from a basin, unaware that Black Thunder had entered silently. "You work too hard," he said, startling her. Sarah clutched her damp cloth to her chest. I didn't hear you come in. The children you helped today, their fever has broken. He set down his bow and quiver. Their grandmother says your medicine is strong. It's not my medicine, Sarah replied. It's science, knowledge. Black Thunder moved to the fire, adding wood carefully. Knowledge is power. My people had knowledge of these lands, of survival. Your people have different knowledge. Yet we can share it, Sarah said, settling opposite him, more comfortable now. That's why I'm here. For the first time, she saw something soften in his expression. Yes, that is why you are here. Later that night, a commotion outside woke Sarah from sleep. Black Thunder was already gone, and she wrapped herself in a blanket to investigate. Outside, torches illuminated a group of riders entering the camp. At their center was a wounded warrior being helped from his horse, blood soaking his side. Soldiers! Morningstar appeared beside her, voice tight with anger. They attacked our hunters near the creek. Black Thunder emerged from the crowd, his face a mask of controlled fury as he conferred with the other warriors. When he noticed Sarah watching, he strode toward her. Your people's soldiers shot without warning, he said, voice low and dangerous. 2 men dead, 3 wounded. Let me help, Sarah offered, but he blocked her path. These men will not accept your medicine. They believe white hands bring death. That's ridiculous, Sarah protested. I can help stop the bleeding at least. Black Thunder studied her for a long moment. Come then, but if they refuse, you must honor their choice. Throughout the night, Sarah worked alongside the tribe's medicine woman, applying poultices and bandages. One warrior refused her touch, but the others, seeing her dedication, reluctantly accepted her aid. As dawn broke, Sarah stumbled exhausted back to the teepee, where she found Black Thunder waiting, his face grave. The youngest warrior will die without better medicine, he said without preamble. Your uncle must come. The fort is 3 hours' ride, Sarah replied, already gathering supplies. We need to go now. We? Black Thunder raised an eyebrow. I'm coming with you. The boy needs constant care until we reach my uncle. Something in her determination seemed to reach him, and he nodded once. Be ready to ride in 10 minutes. The journey to Fort Benton was tense and silent. Black Thunder led the way on his powerful stallion, while Sarah followed on a gentle mare, constantly glancing back at the wounded warrior who lay secured to a travois, pulled by a third horse. The young man's breathing had grown shallow, his skin burning with fever despite the cool autumn air. Twice they stopped to change the blood-soaked bandages. Each time Sarah worked quickly while Black Thunder stood guard, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. When she struggled to lift the warrior's head to give him water, Black Thunder silently knelt beside her, supporting the young man with surprising gentleness. His name is Running Fox, Black Thunder said unexpectedly as they continued their journey. He is my cousin's son, 16 summers. Sarah glanced at the boy's face, so young beneath the pain. What happened with the soldiers? Black Thunder's jaw tightened. Our hunters were tracking elk on our traditional grounds. The blue coats claimed they crossed some invisible line. His voice remained controlled, but Sarah could sense the anger beneath. They fired warning shots. Running Fox's horse was startled. When he fell, they thought he was attacking. They rode in silence for several minutes before he added, Your uncle is a good man. Not all white men are the same, I know this, but many see only our skin, not our hearts. Many of my people would say the same about yours, Sarah replied softly. His dark eyes met hers. Then perhaps we understand each other better than we thought. When they reached Fort Benton, Sarah was shocked by the stares and whispers that followed them. Women pulled children aside as they passed, and men reached instinctively for weapons. Black Thunder rode proudly, seemingly oblivious to the hostility, but Sarah noticed how his hand never strayed far from his knife. Palmer hurried from his clinic when he saw them, immediately directing the wounded warrior be brought inside. As Sarah dismounted, Lieutenant Davis approached, hand resting on his pistol. Miss Calloway, he said, deliberately ignoring Black Thunder. Are you well? Has he mistreated you? I'm perfectly fine, Lieutenant, Sarah replied coldly. And he has a name. This is my husband, Black Thunder. We've brought an injured boy who needs immediate care. The lieutenant's face registered shock at her defense. Your husband. So the rumors are true. You actually went through with this arrangement. Black Thunder dismounted, standing protectively near Sarah. My wife helps our people heal. We need supplies. The tension between the two men was palpable. Sarah placed a hand on Black Thunder's arm, feeling the muscles tense beneath her touch. Lieutenant, please inform the commander that we're here on a medical emergency, not to cause trouble. Inside the clinic, Dr. Palmer worked diligently to remove the bullet from Running Fox's shoulder. Sarah assisted, grateful for the medical training her father had insisted upon despite society's disapproval of educated women. Black Thunder observed from the corner, his face impassive even as the boy cried out in pain. The bullet missed the major vessels, Edward explained as he worked. With proper care, he should recover. Later, as Running Fox slept under the influence of laudanum, Sarah and Black Thunder stepped outside for air. The fort had grown quiet as evening approached, though Sarah noticed soldiers still watching them from a distance. Your uncle says we must stay until morning, Black Thunder said, gazing at the sunset. The boy cannot travel yet. Sarah nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. We can use my old room. I'll ask for extra blankets. I will sleep outside with the horses, he replied firmly. That's ridiculous, Sarah protested. It's too cold, and the soldiers are already suspicious. Please, the room is large enough. After a moment's hesitation, he agreed. That night, in the small room where Sarah had once contemplated escape, they created an awkward arrangement of blankets, with Black Thunder insisting on sleeping near the door to protect her. Sarah lay awake, listening to his steady breathing. Thank you, she said softly, unsure if he was still awake, for bringing Running Fox here, for trusting my uncle. After a long silence, his deep voice came through the darkness. When I was a boy, I also was shot by soldiers. Sarah turned toward his voice, though she could barely make out his silhouette in the dim light. I was 10, he continued. My father and I were hunting. The bullet shattered my leg bone. A white doctor at the mission saved it, though many said it should be cut off. He paused. I can still run and ride as well as any warrior, but I know what good medicine can do. Is that why you agreed to the marriage? Sarah asked. Grey Wolf decided, Black Thunder replied. But I did not oppose him. Our children are dying. Pride helps no one. The next morning, Running Fox was conscious but weak. Edward insisted he stay another day, providing Black Thunder and Sarah an unexpected opportunity to gather needed supplies. Together, they visited the trading post, where Sarah was dismayed by the inflated prices the shopkeeper tried to charge upon seeing her Blackfeet companion. This is theft, she declared loudly, drawing attention from other customers. These blankets were half this price 3 weeks ago. The shopkeeper reddened. Supply and demand, ma'am. Winter's coming. And you think you can cheat us because my husband is Blackfeet? She stood her ground, aware of Black Thunder's surprised expression at her vehemence. We'll take our business elsewhere. As they left empty-handed, Black Thunder spoke quietly. There is nowhere else. He knows this. Then we'll send word to Helena for supplies, Sarah replied, her mind racing. My uncle has connections there. Black Thunder studied her with newfound respect. You have a warrior's spirit, Sarah Palmer. Calloway, she corrected automatically, then paused. Though I suppose it is Palmer now, isn't it? Among my people you would be called wife of Black Thunder, he said, the hint of a smile touching his lips for the first time since she'd known him. That seems rather possessive, she replied. Is it? He considered this. Perhaps. But I would be called husband of Sarah just the same. As they walked back to the clinic, Sarah noticed how people stepped aside, some with fear, others with contempt. Yet Black Thunder walked tall, acknowledging those few who nodded respectfully. How do you bear it? She asked. The way they look at you? I see only what matters, he replied. The rest is smoke. That evening, as they prepared to sleep in the same awkward arrangement, Black Thunder surprised her by asking about the book she carried. Shakespeare, Sarah explained. Poems and plays from a great English writer. Read some, he requested, settling onto his blankets. Sarah opened to her favorite passage from The Tempest and began to read. When she finished, she found Black Thunder watching her intently. Your words paint pictures, he said, like our stories around the fire. Would you tell me one? Sarah asked. A story of your people? In the quiet room, Black Thunder's deep voice recounted the creation tale of the Blackfeet, of Old Man and the animals. of how the world came to be. Sarah listened, captivated not just by the story, but by the animation in his usually stern face as he spoke of his people's traditions. When morning came, Running Fox was strong enough to travel. As they prepared to leave, Lieutenant Davis approached with several soldiers. "There's been an incident," he announced grimly. "A settler's cabin was raided last night, 10 miles east. Family of 4 killed. Blackfeet tracks were found." Black Thunder's body tensed, his hand moving to his knife. "That's impossible," Sarah interjected. "The Blackfeet are camped west of here, and they wouldn't leave tracks so obviously." "Nevertheless," Davis continued, "the commander has ordered all Indians to be detained for questioning." Black Thunder's eyes narrowed dangerously. "The boy needs medicine. We return to our people now." Soldiers moved forward, hands on their weapons. Sarah stepped between them and her husband, heart pounding. "Lieutenant, my uncle will vouch for Black Thunder's whereabouts last night. This is absurd." "Step aside, Mrs. Palmer," Davis ordered. "This doesn't concern you." "He is my husband," Sarah replied, surprising herself with the fierce certainty in her voice. "It absolutely concerns me." The standoff at Fort Benton lasted an excruciating hour before Dr. Palmer's testimony, and the intervention of a sympathetic cavalry captain named Bennett allowed them to leave. As they rode away, Sarah could feel the tension radiating from Black Thunder, whose silence had deepened into something darker. "You should not have stood between me and their guns," he finally said when they were miles from the fort. "It was dangerous." "Would you have preferred I let them arrest you for something you didn't do?" Sarah retorted. "I have faced white men's accusations before," he replied grimly. "Their justice sees only what it wishes to see." Running Fox, though weak, managed to stay upright on his horse as they traveled, the medicine from Dr. Palmer easing his pain. By nightfall, they had covered half the distance to the Blackfeet camp, stopping to make a small fire in a sheltered ravine. As Sarah prepared a broth for Running Fox, Black Thunder disappeared into the gathering darkness. He returned an hour later with a freshly killed rabbit, which he skinned with practiced efficiency. "Captain Bennett," he said unexpectedly as they ate. "He spoke of you." Sarah looked up, surprised. "What did he say?" "That you were Edward Palmer's niece. That you came west seeking purpose after your father died." Black Thunder studied her across the fire. "He said you were engaged to a doctor in Boston, but broke it when you discovered he experimented on poor patients without their knowledge." Sarah stared at him, shocked that Bennett knew this private history. "That's true," she admitted. "Thomas, my fiancé, believed the advancement of medicine justified any means. I couldn't accept that." "You believe all people deserve the same care," Black Thunder observed, "even enemies." "I don't consider your people enemies," Sarah replied. "Yet you feared me," he said matter-of-factly. "When we first met." Sarah couldn't deny it. "Yes, your reputation preceded you. As a savage who collects scalps." His voice held no accusation, only a resigned understanding. "Something like that," she admitted. "But I was wrong." Black Thunder added wood to the fire, sparks rising into the night sky. "I have killed men in battle," he said evenly, "but only warriors who chose to fight. Never women, never children, never the defenseless." His eyes met hers across the flames. "This is the way of honor." That night, as Running Fox slept deeply under the effects of the laudanum, Sarah found herself huddled close to Black Thunder for warmth, their blankets combined against the autumn chill. His nearness should have made her uncomfortable, yet instead she felt strangely protected. "The stars are different here," she murmured, gazing upward through the branches. "So much brighter than in Boston." "The same stars," Black Thunder corrected gently, but seen through clearer eyes. He pointed upward, tracing patterns. "There is the buffalo, and there the 7 brothers who became the stars you call the Dipper." As he named the constellations in his people's tradition, Sarah felt something shift between them, a bridge forming across the vast divide of their different worlds. They reached the Blackfeet camp the following afternoon to find it in turmoil. Soldiers had visited during their absence, searching teepees and frightening children while looking for raiders. Grey Wolf had maintained a fragile peace, but tensions were high. That evening, a council fire was lit. Sarah sat beside Morning Star as the men debated their response to the increasing military presence. Some younger warriors called for retaliation, while Grey Wolf counseled patience. When Black Thunder finally spoke, the entire circle fell silent. "The blue coats seek reason for war," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. "They create stories of raiders to justify taking more land. If we attack, we give them what they want." A young warrior jumped to his feet. "So we do nothing while they push us from our hunting grounds? While they kill our brothers?" "I did not say do nothing," Black Thunder replied calmly. "I say be smarter than they expect. The doctor's medicine helps our children. His niece, my wife, stood between me and soldiers' guns at the fort. Not all white people are enemies." Sarah felt eyes turn toward her, some curious, others skeptical. "Captain Bennett seeks truth about the murdered settlers," Black Thunder continued. "He believes Crow raiders or perhaps white men disguised as Indians are responsible. We should help him find proof." The council continued late into the night, eventually agreeing to Black Thunder's proposal to cooperate with Bennett while strengthening their defenses. As the gathering dispersed, Sarah approached her husband. "Thank you for what you said about me," she said quietly. "I spoke only truth," he replied, his face softened by the dying firelight. "You have courage." Over the next weeks, as winter settled across the prairie, Sarah's role in the tribe evolved. What had begun as a reluctant arrangement transformed as she worked alongside the medicine woman, combining Western treatments with traditional knowledge. The children especially sought her out, fascinated by her stories and the small wooden toys her uncle sent from the fort. Black Thunder remained reserved, yet Sarah noticed subtle changes. He began taking her on rides to gather medicinal plants, teaching her to recognize landmarks and navigate the vast landscape. In the evenings, he carved a small flute, filling their teepee with hauntingly beautiful melodies. They still maintained separate sleeping areas, but the invisible barrier between them thinned. Sometimes their hands would touch as they worked together, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. One bitter December night, as wind howled outside their teepee, Sarah awoke to find Black Thunder adding wood to the fire, his face troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting up. "Nothing," he replied automatically, then reconsidered. "Dreams, old memories." Sarah wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, moving closer to the fire. "Tell me." He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I dreamed of my first wife, Snow Lily. She died bringing our son into the world. The boy lived only 2 days." The raw pain in his voice moved her deeply. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "And your second wife?" "Dawnbird. The fever took her last winter." His hands worked methodically, arranging the burning logs. "Some say I am cursed." "That's superstition," Sarah said firmly. "Disease isn't a curse. It's something we can fight with knowledge." Black Thunder looked up, something vulnerable in his usually guarded eyes. "When Grey Wolf first spoke of this marriage, I refused. I did not wish to bring death to another woman. Yet here I am," Sarah said softly, "very much alive." "Yes," he agreed, his gaze holding hers. "Here you are." The blizzard that struck 3 days later was the worst in living memory, according to the elders. Snow piled higher than the entrances of the teepees, forcing people to dig their way out. Hunting became impossible, and within a week, food supplies dwindled dangerously. Black Thunder and 3 other warriors ventured out to hunt despite the treacherous conditions. When they hadn't returned by nightfall, Sarah paced anxiously, alternating between worry and anger at his recklessness. Morningstar kept her company, showing surprising insight. "My brother was not always so serious," she confided. "Before the deaths, before the soldiers pushed us from our best hunting grounds, he laughed often." "I find that hard to imagine," Sarah admitted. "I have seen him watching you," Morningstar continued, her eyes knowing. "When you treat the children, when you learn our ways, his face changes." Before Sarah could respond, shouts outside announced the hunter's return. She rushed out to find Black Thunder being helped from his horse, blood freezing on his leggings where a bull elk had gored his thigh. Despite his protests, Sarah insisted on treating him immediately. As she cleaned and stitched the jagged wound, her hands steady despite her racing heart, Black Thunder watched her face intently. "You were worried," he observed. "Of course I was worried," she replied, focusing on her task. "You could have frozen to death out there." "We brought meat," he said simply. "The people will eat." Sarah tied off the final stitch. There are other hunters. You don't have to risk yourself every time. It is my responsibility, he said, wincing as she applied a poultice. As chief's son, as your husband, I never asked you to risk your life for meat, Sarah said, her emotions finally breaking through. I would rather have you alive than a dozen elk. Black Thunder's hand covered hers, warm despite the bitter cold he'd endured. You care what happens to me? The question, so simply asked, made Sarah pause. When had this arranged marriage, this practical alliance, transformed into something that made her heart race when he entered their teepee? When had his rare smiles become something she worked to earn? Yes, she admitted quietly. I care very much. That night, as a fire blazed warmly in their teepee and snow continued to fall outside, the barrier between their sleeping areas disappeared. When Black Thunder hesitantly extended his hand across the space that had separated them for months, Sarah took it, moving into his embrace with a certainty that surprised them both. Spring came early to the Montana Territory, bringing with it unexpected news. Captain Bennett arrived at the Blackfeet camp, with proof that the settler killings had been orchestrated by land speculators hoping to provoke a war that would clear the valuable territory of its indigenous inhabitants. 3 men had been arrested, and the military commander had been replaced. More significantly, Bennett brought word that the government had agreed to expand the Blackfeet reservation boundaries to include their traditional hunting grounds in exchange for peaceful cooperation. Your husband's strategy worked, Bennett told Sarah privately. His willingness to work with us rather than fight proved crucial. Not many men, white or Indian, would have shown such restraint. As Bennett prepared to leave, he handed Sarah a packet of letters from her family in Boston. Your mother writes that she wishes to visit this summer, he said with a smile. I believe she's curious to meet her new son-in-law. Sarah laughed, imagining proper Boston society matron Eleanor Calloway confronted with the imposing Black Thunder. Yet somehow the image didn't seem as incongruous as it once would have. That evening, as they walked along the creek that bordered the camp, Sarah shared her mother's plans. She will be welcome, Black Thunder said, surprising her. Family is important. Sarah studied his profile, still struck sometimes by the transformation in him, or perhaps in her perception of him. The stern warrior remained, but she now saw also the thoughtful leader, the patient teacher, the tender husband. I was thinking, she said carefully, that perhaps we could build a proper cabin near the creek, something combining both our traditions. The teepee is fine, but if my mother visits— Black Thunder stopped, turning to face her fully. You wish to stay then? When the year of our agreement ends? Sarah realized he had been anticipating her departure, expecting this arrangement to conclude once its purpose was fulfilled. The thought of leaving him, of returning to Boston's drawing rooms and social constraints, seemed impossible now. I wish to stay, she confirmed, reaching for his hand. Not because of any agreement, but because this is where I belong. With you. Black Thunder drew her close, his arms encircling her as naturally as if they'd been meant for this all along. Then we will build a home, he said, his voice warm against her hair. Between 2 worlds, belonging to both. As the sun set over the distant mountains, painting the prairie in gold and crimson, Sarah reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. What had begun as sacrifice had transformed into the most profound love she had ever known. A love that bridged cultures, healed old wounds, and promised a future neither of them could have imagined alone.